Lisa?
Oh, I totally agree with Connie and whoever said it before you, Connie, was it Tirsa? That yeah, the identifying the objectives of the community engagement is like pretty critical. I was just gonna say quickly on the topic of the logistics of the questionnaire. I was just thinking back to a time when I did like I did election monitoring for the government a while back, where you like two people kind of pair up and drive around to a bunch of sites and ask a bunch of questions, and then are supposed to collect a ton of information and then bring it back. And it's of course, you know, it's like if it's not like well uh, documented and well regimented, it's just like a nightmare of data collection, because you have tons of people doing this. And yeah, like literally the way that we did it is like we literally had these like printed paper questionnaires. We had like a stack of like 10 of them, so they're all the exact same document. So you're taking the exact same document with you to every event, and you're asking the same questions. And we even kind of broke it up a little bit into like one person asked the questions and the other person like did a lot of the writing, because like it's really hard to like both like ask questions and follow up questions and like also to like write down all of the things. So you know, maybe even splitting stuff up a little bit that way could be helpful. But yeah, just thinking of times when I've done something a little bit similar to this, like how we made it work.
Thank you, Commissioner Lovisa. And I know Commissioner Charlie raised her hand and Commissioner Faith, but I'm gonna read your comment, Commissioner Faith, because I think it's important, and then I will go, it's also important, but I will go with Commissioner Charlie too. And Commissioner Faith say, we do have our objectives outlined in the framework. Perhaps it would be helpful to review that in this meeting. And I know the Samir is already connecting. We can talk about it, but in the meantime, I will pass it to Commissioner Charlie.
No, I'm going to wait till I am able to review the outline.
The outline.
Yeah. The thanks.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you. There is here. And Commissioner Fay, you want to talk about it? I know you raised your hand before Commissioner Sima, or you want to review the document first?
I do want to review the document, and I want to address just the objectives. Commissioner Tirsa, I think what I heard is like, especially when we are doing town halls, it'd be really lovely to say, here are our objectives. And with our partners, how do we be like culturally sensitive? Like, how do we fulfill our objectives to your community? And so I think I'm just putting that as a nugget in our brains, so that while we're reviewing this, we also can think through, like, how do we make the invitation that we're not just going in with like, here's exactly what we need, but that we're asking culturally responsive questions to whomever we're going to. And I mean, the objectives are very, in my mind, culturally responsive, but just thinking that through.
Thank you, Commissioner Faith. And now to Commissioner Sima.
Hi, my question, I may have missed something, and so pardon me if this is known information, if you guys can like help me with it. I'm trying to better understand, okay, so in our subcommittee community engagement planning document, it goes over the fact that we are to co-create basically community education and community engagement events. Two completely different strategies and a similar run that will provide us information vital, obviously, within our fact-finding phase. So if we're talking about community education and then doing community engagement, are we looking to do both of these in the same events? Are we looking to have separate events to address each one of these two strategies? And how many events are we looking to do between now and the end of July? which to me, it would guide me better in being able to be like, okay, how do we strategize specifically and as far as our goals and outcomes?
Thank you, Commissioner Sima. And we have the objectives right in front of us. It will be, you need time to, if somebody wants to answer, Commissioner Sima, or just you want just take time and review the objectives?
Yeah, so the objectives for me are clear.
Hmm.
I guess for we should. I wanna try and figure out how many engagements how many events are we looking to create to be able to make sure that we can address different aspects of the objectives and ultimately have that qualitative data outcome.
Thank you, Commissioner. How many, as Commissioner Sima asked, how many exercise or how many town halls or how many engagement are you planning before to complete before July 30th? That was his question. You have a list of 20 organizations, and yeah, Commissioner Faith and then Commissioner Tirsa.
July 30th is so soon. So I instantly feel some anxiety and panic around like how many we can do before then, especially I know that we are also hiring, not we, the city is hiring a community engagement person. So I would love to have their help on like coordinating. I think one thing that I think we have an amazing list of here's all of our partners. And in my mind, this subcommittee would be really helpful to say, like, not that we put them in rank order, but how do we prioritize which communities, knowing that we are a band of 18 volunteers who have full-time jobs or other commitments and one potentially new community engagement person. So I think I'm answering your question with a question, CMOB. How many can we do before July 30th? I'm like, how many can we do?
Commissioner and Co-Chair Tirsa, please.
Yeah, similar thought to what Commissioner Faith just shared. I think seeing what partners will have or already have a wider reach to community members could be a good start for prioritizing working with those partners. That's also something that I was wondering, how can we prioritize certain organizations with the time that we have, and also just with the logistics and planning and reaching out to these organizations and their availability and our team leads availability outside of our weekly meetings. So I think how many depends on, I think it's still up in the air, and but I think that a good start would probably be prioritizing those partners that have a wider reach to the community. But I also want to keep in mind, if we do have more than one or two partners that maybe work with similar community members, also making sure that we have a diverse organizations, I guess, or organizations that work with not similar community members, but yeah, I guess a number of community, a number of members of various communities.
Thank you, Commissioner Tirsa. And Commissioner Christian?
Hi, yeah, I was curious. The July, I too agree that July 30th is very soon. And I was curious, is that date the absolute end of when we would be potentially doing a community engagement outreach? I feel like I've heard floating in certain like in the larger, the full PAC meetings that we might be able to extend it if needed. I was curious if there's any details on like how far, if we're the ones who decide how far we need to extend it if we need to, or is there like a time frame where it's sort of like, all right, that's like a soft deadline and there is like a hard deadline later. I don't know if anyone could give any clarity on that. I know I've heard that kind of floating around that there could be an extension. Just curious.
Thank you, Commissioner Christian. And before they answer, I will pass it to Connie and then to the staff. Commissioner Connie?
Oh, I think staff should weigh in on that. That was part of my comment as well. I can speak after the staff speaks to that.
Yeah, and for the commissioner, I just want to remind you that in the agenda, we have later and next steps when we talk about the number of the meetings. At this moment, the asked question is what kind of processes we be consistent in the total preparation. But yeah, your questions are pretty good. It's just that in the agenda, we give time for that. And Samir, would you like to?
Yeah, to answer Kristen's question, it's sort of two parts. Community engagement is defined in the agenda and scope document, which is approved by the full commission as extending until the end of the commission already. And therefore events can continue, throughout and will continue throughout. This particular subcommittee is created at minimum for the length of the phase and may be extended on beyond that to help coordinate it. May get altered, may get extended or recreated. So that's up to the full commission or the co-chairs of the full commission, I should say as well. But the July 30th date may be somewhere near to the end of the phase. And for the purpose of having some of this community engagement work and input at these events, inform the work of the subcommittee, inform the work of the full commission during this phase, as well as to not try to do that full list later, but start taking on a few at a time. It provides somewhat of a pause point to try and have some done before it and then do others after it. And it's up to you as a subcommittee how many fit on either side of that. Somewhat not arbitrary, but date that fits in kind of with the end of the phase.
Thank you, Samir. Is there any more discussions or comment or questions? Thank you for all your comment and questions. They're all help. But in this particular subject about the process, they should be consistent, followed by the PAC members that are assigned as a member leads. Thank you. What other process? Commissioner Faith and then Commissioner Connie and then Commissioner Christian. Commissioner Faith?
Yeah, I think, I mean, maybe this is the place that we're designing this right now, but just having pretty standard questions. So here's what we're asking of for feedback or what we're hoping to hear from people. Or maybe it's not that, but like what the invitation is that we're even listening to. Feels really important to me. And then another consistent thing is like, how do we make or do our best to ensure that people feel safe to share potentially really traumatizing events they've had with police or share their lived experience of trauma. So I think this subcommittee offering some sort of, I don't know, like process in place for leads that are there to, like, I don't know, guarantee confidentiality or yeah, so those are the two things for me, is a kind of a similar list of questions or talking conversation starters, and then like what is the process that we have in place for helping community members feel safe to be able to share with us.
Thank you, Commissioner Fate. Commissioner Connie?
Yes, I was gonna make a suggestion that we could go back to the list and try to come up with a process for setting up the town hall and maybe selecting 5 or more of the different groups from that list to engage and see if there were either similar groupings, or maybe we want to have town halls be very diverse, but start to like kind of put together the process a little bit.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Connie. And that's a very good point, and we will definitely, as part of the agenda and the next steps, but thank you for bringing it up. I made a note. Thank you. Commissioner Christian?
Thank you. I wanted to not elaborate, but I wanted to kind of build upon the conversation around what's the word I'm looking for? Questions being the same across each, there's a word I'm looking for, I can't find it, but questions being the same across each town hall. I was curious, not curious, I was thinking that it might be good to have a subsection of those questions, or a section of those questions where maybe we ask the community, as like maybe one of the questions could kind of be like opening a little bit of a dialogue with the community, so that we're not just absorbing like data that we need from the community, but also we're hearing what they might, if they have suggestions that we haven't thought about, just in the off chance that the list that we make doesn't cover something that we totally like are blindsided by, or something that we just like haven't thought about, because each community brings something different, and that's hopefully what we get from having a diverse, you know, lots of different organizations reaching out, lots of different communities that we're talking to. So that was one thing. People can comment on that if they want to. That's one offering. And then the other one was, I had a thought that might be a good idea, and people can comment on this too. I don't know. This is just sort of what I'm brainstorming. Maybe if we thought about what common language we might want to use in different town halls. I don't know if it's better to have like recognizing that we want to be culturally sensitive as well. So I don't know if that common language might be an issue, might be a double-edged sword, but maybe it would be good to have some kind of, you know, idea of how we'd want to convey the information, generally speaking, so we're all not saying totally different words every single time, you know. Yeah, anyway, those are kind of two offerings that I'm sort of thinking of. I don't know if other people might have more sense on that. CENTS, like sense, you know. Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Christian. I will pass it to Commissioner Lovisa, and then we're gonna go to the next discussion, just to be able to cover all the discussions. And then on the next step, we can talk about everything. Commissioner Lovisa. You are on mute.
Thank you so much. I wanted to say I second Christian's idea about having kind of an open question, or a, you know, yeah, a place where, because I'm sure there are so many things that we won't think to ask or know to ask until they're brought to us by the community members. I think that's also really important. So but yeah, I was thinking in terms of preparation, kind of going back to Faith's point about making sure that when we reach out initially to organizations, that we reach out with a really clear ask, a really clear request, a really clear invitation, and then probably clarifying that again upon arrival at the town hall or whatever event it might be, and just making it really clear, like, you know, what is it we're doing? Like, why are we here? Like, you know, yeah, what are some of our objectives, even if our primary objective is like to listen. Uh, and then I think, yeah, Claire or Faith had mentioned clarifying, like identifying like things like safety and confidentiality for folks, and we can do some talking about like what that means. But maybe the town leads could even do some reading about, like, you know, if it's a certain org, do some reading about the org itself and a little bit about the history of the org, so that they are not, you know, so they're walking in with some bit of knowledge about who they're talking to, and also so that we're just like showing adequate respect basically to the people whose lives we are entering. And then something I thought about was in terms of like accessibility, like maybe we try to provide these questions that we're talking about asking, maybe we try to provide these questions to the organization ahead of time. And maybe we bring printed out copies of the questions that other people can see. Because I'm just thinking about, like, you know, I have different ideas when I see a question, you know, and then I'm asked to answer it 1 second later, versus if I see a question and I'm, you know, given, you know, a month of lead time or a week of lead time, or even a couple, or even an hour or a few minutes of lead time, right? It just gives me time, gives people time to think about the answers to the questions. So I think we could do a lot to like increase accessibility for folks who might be giving us answers.
Thank you, Commissioner Lovisa. Then I will move it to slide 20 for the next part of the discussion. And remember, continue, be brief. Everybody can participate several times, but it's 2 minutes. Be facilitated, raise your hand in Zoom and allow me to call on people and wait to promote conversation. And then be constructive, look forward and discuss how to make the commission's work more successful in the future of each question. And the next question is, are there consistent processes we can develop for member leads to follow in communicating what the public say at town halls to the full Police Accountability Commission? We were talking about what process we will use to go, but once we hear and we collect or gather the stories and the data, do you think what process the commission should use to report, to share what the people say to the full Police Accountability Commission? Yes, Commissioner Faith.
I think that I jumped ahead and I answered this question earlier, so sorry, y'all. I got ahead of myself. But that would be my suggestion. I won't repeat it because you heard me earlier, so that's my suggestion to this.
Thank you, Commissioner Faith. Commissioner Lovisa?
Sure, I agree with Faith's previous idea. I agree with a questionnaire. I like the idea of having it like printed out and brought there, and then, you know, you have a template for taking your notes, which I'm a huge note taker, but I'm also a very messy note taker. So anything that helps me like consolidate and organize my notes is a giant help to me. I think I mentioned I do really like the idea of kind of designating a note taker who is kind of the primary note taker. If we have a couple of members of the commission, it can just be so helpful, because I mean, yeah, I don't know. I feel like I can either kind of listen and talk, or I can write, right? Like those are, for me, those are like two different skills that don't always go together really well. So a designated note taker, I think, is a good idea. And then, you know, back when I did this type of thing before, you know, I was like, one person was asking the questions and then I was like taking handwritten notes, like just copious handwritten notes on the questionnaire. And then we took it back and we submitted them to someone. And I'm sure that somebody, some poor soul went in and like probably hand typed up like the things that I had written into this, you know, questionnaire, and then was like doing some other, you know, data consolidation with it. And so I do think most likely that that's going to be a step that we should consider. That's a step that I think also probably has to happen. The handwritten notes are also going to need to be like keyed into this this fillable form. So just another step to take into account.
Thank you, Commissioner Lovisa. Commissioner Faith, and then Commissioner Tirsa.
Sorry, y'all, I feel like I'm taking up so much space, so please be like Faith. I am curious if, like, is it important to us to know things like how many people were there, or like the demographics of people that were there, or who we're hearing from? And we haven't talked about, like, for folks who may not be able to participate in Zoom or in person, do we want to have like I know right now we have a form online, but do we want to have like a community engagement form of, listen, I can't make it to this event, but I still have opinions to give? And if that's the case, are there things that we want to know about the people who are giving the feedback? So if the event is at Apano, do we want to know that there were 45 Asian business owners there? Or, you know, so in that case, how do we, if we want to know that, how do we plan on, like, are we asking people to fill out demographics before they come to a meeting? Or so things like that, of like, just logistically, how would we do that? And if it is worth the and I guess I'm asking, is it worth the logistical hurdle to get that information from people?
Thank you, Commissioner Faith, and I will pass it to Commissioner Tirsa.
I'm wondering if the same standardized form that we are discussing, if we can also have that form available online to be submitted online. So for those who are unable to attend, to access the questionnaire or the form and collect the data that we need, and have the question and have them fill out the questions that we are asking. I wonder if that's an option that we can have. Yeah, having maybe like a Google Sheets. Yeah, that can be filled out by community members. And in terms of collecting data like demographics, I do think that we should collect that data. I do think that it is important to know if there are specific community groups that are expressing similar points of views or similar feelings around police accountability. I think it would be very useful for our work.
Thank you, Commissioner Tirsa. Commissioner Connie?
Yeah, I was going to state that with like looking at our objectives, they're fairly broad, meaning like they mostly state to just connect and call in and create opportunity with various communities. So the intention of collecting the data of demographics, age, you know, who, I guess it's like, what would that serve? Like, so, I mean, I do agree that we should have a sense of how many people are attending the various events, but I don't know how, like minute we need to get into the details of the demographics. And so because it's not in any of our objectives to like create a, you know, some kind of fact-finding recap of how many people in which communities we've touched. So therefore, it might just be easier to create sort of like a, like online survey and or in-person survey when people fill out like, about the experience or why they're there, sort of like what our intro is a little more broad and accessible. But I do agree it should be online and in person and, maybe potentially offered virtually.
Thank you, Commissioner Connie. Commissioner Charlie, please.
Okay, so this particular question is, could you repeat the question for
Sure.
me real quick?
Sure. Are there consistent processes we can develop today for member leads to follow in communicating what the public say at town halls to the full Police Accountability Commission?
Okay, thank you. I think consistently, then we should possibly have someone to gather that information and somehow summarize it before we distribute all of it to all of us, like make it more manageable to know what community is saying and asking for. I don't know, I don't want all those coming at me all at once in any format, unless I'm going to be summarizing it, which I'll do, but yeah, just a thought.
Thank you, Commissioner Charlie. Commissioner Faith?
Yeah, I agree. We already get like a lot of information to process through, Commissioner Charlie. And I think you're right, Connie, around, I don't know that we need to be like, we had 67 Black people tell us this and 32 Asian people tell us this. But I do think that I guess I'm like, my brain is going like to the long game when at the end of this, we have a package in place that's like, here's our recommendations, approve this, please, City Council. Is that I do still want to be able to say like, hey, we engaged with X, Y, and Z communities, or we prioritized hearing from X, Y, and Z communities. And so without kind of collecting that demographic information, I'm curious how we can demonstrate that in our final product. And maybe it is just saying like, we're reaching out to X Chamber of Commerce that prioritize Latinx businesses, or X whomever who prioritizes NAYA who works with the Native community, or whomever who works with this community. Maybe that's it. I'm just trying to think ahead of like, how do we at the end of this demonstrate that we've been really thoughtful about including or prioritizing diverse communities and who we're hearing from.
Thank you, Commissioner Faith. Commissioner Charlie?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Faith. I was just going to say something similar. I just want to make sure that we are gathering information from the targeted communities, and to me that should be a priority and I think, as far as I know, communities that are impacted want you to know that information. They want to make sure they're heard. And I don't see a problem with asking them that demographic info. I think it'd be really helpful to know, yeah, that they're being heard.
Thank you, Commissioner Charlie. And it is 8:08. We're gonna take a short break. We're gonna take a 10 minutes break. We will come back at 8:18 to continue with the discussion. I'm gonna stop the recording, our meeting. And the next section, we're gonna resume our meeting. And now we have our discussion for next steps. And now, yeah, we can talk about all the questions and all the conversation that we were talking is the town halls. And let's move to slide 24. We are now going to ask for volunteers to serve as member leads to start planning a few town halls. This is not the only opportunity, so pick groups you think you should have town halls now rather than later. It doesn't mean the group is more or less important. It just means we want to start planning that town hall earlier. We will only be moving forward if there are at least 2 members who wants to be leads for communication with the partner organization. Before we open it up to volunteers, co-chairs, do you have anything you like to add? Co-chair Connie or co-chair Tirsa before we start a conversation?
Yes, in an effort to try to maybe like reach as many organizations as possible, should we, in the effort of a town hall, should we try to partner some of the organizations together? And not even by like, oh, these are all, you know, groups that fight for a specific kind of justice or anything. Like maybe it's even randomized so that the town halls are like more robust and diverse, but it might, because of our timeline, which, you know, at this moment doesn't quite have an extension, it might make sense to kind of group some of the groups together.
And we also, if you like, we can see the list of organizations that is right here. It doesn't matter, doesn't means that you cannot add more organizations but the list of the organization that was identified as potential partner organizations from the whole PAC in April 21st. It was a work session on community engagement. I'm sorry, not the meeting. Yes, Commissioner Charlie.
Okay, well, until we make the decision what the groupings are going to be, I'd love to volunteer to be lead. And I'd love to, because I know so many people at NARA and NEA and potentially the wisdom of the elders. If we're doing that now, and if someone would like to join me.
Do you think, Charlie, it makes sense to have like all the groups like that you know, like in one town hall, or do you think it's important to keep everyone in a separate meeting?
I think for the Indigenous community, it's really helpful. They love to get together, and that's kind of like important, that kind of affinity grouping for them, and being around people we're familiar with, it makes it more comfortable, and a lot in common, and then I also know what works for this community and bringing them together.
So do we need to move to like maybe have a vote to group, to kind of create, maybe the next step is to try to group some of the organizations together and like affinity groups so that we can be more effective with our time in the town halls?
You can do any time any way you want. We just want volunteers. We don't have to vote. And is Charlie mentioned that these 3 organizations, they can group together. We just need more volunteers. But if you wanna, you can do any way you will prefer, but it's not necessary to vote. Commissioner Sima and then Commissioner Fate.
Apologies, I forgot to lower my hand. You guys already answered it.
Oh, thank you. And just to make sure that the organizations that you mentioned, Commissioner Charlie, is NEA, NARA, and the third one, just to have it in the notes.
Wisdom of the elders.
Okay, wisdom about the elders. Okay. Thank you. And remember, we not just need one person, we need a couple, 2 or 3 volunteers and that for those organizations as well. We have one. Commissioner Fate?
I would love Charlie to help with that group.
Perfect, thank you. We have 2 leads. Commissioner Lovisa, thank you, Commissioner Fate.
Oh, I would also like to volunteer to help
Yes.
Charlie with that.
That's perfect because we need 2 or 3. And since she is grouping 3 organizations together, that's pretty good, Commissioner Lovisa. Thank you. Who else would like to volunteer with other organizations?
I mean, I know that you have 3, but I would also support that group if necessary or needed.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Commissioner Sima?
Do we have a stipend that we're putting out to these organizations for partnering with us?
That's a good question. And I don't know, I will pass it to staff.
That is a very good question, Commissioner Sima. The answer is we have an organizational ability. Like if we partner with a group, there is an opportunity to stipend the group. It wouldn't be individualized for the attendees. Just to clarify the distinction there. And off the top of my head, I do not have the amount, but I remember it being suggested in one of the first few meetings of the commission to have a amount in the, I believe a commission member said in the $200, $300, $400 range, and that was what was in the original request. So it'll be somewhere in that range at most for, if I recall correctly. That is not necessarily what's in the budget or anything like that. But I remember that being a discussion at an earlier meeting. So to answer your question, I'm clear on the amount, but yes, on an organizational basis to town hall partners.
Thank you. Commissioner Connie?
I have, I don't know all of these organizations, so I'll start with that, but I have a relationship and have worked with OJRC, Don't Shoot Portland, and Albina Vision Trust. And I know that OJRC supports Don't Shoot. They're the lawyers for some of the cases that Don't Shoot has brought to the city. So I don't know if that's a natural grouping or not, but I would love to support working with those 3 organizations.
Okay, and is OHRC, Don't Shoot Portland? And what other?
Oh, sorry, Albina Vision Trust.
Albina Vision Trust, thank you. Thank you. Commissioner Charlie and then Commissioner Lovisa. Commissioner Charlie, I'm sorry, you are on mute.
Yes, okay, so that money you were just talking about, the potentially $200 to $300. So is that something we can use in these meetings, like as a what's the word I'm looking for? To encourage folks to show up, like a raffle or of gift cards or something like that?
Like a stipend, maybe?
I will let the staff to answer, because this statement is for the organization and not for the individuals. That's,
I
yeah,
don't
go
think that I can give you a lot of clarity on that in this meeting, but I can definitely look into what is allowed and what's not with in terms of the legal side of it and the budget side of it, and then probably send that information out over email between now and future meetings.
Okay, that'd be great, because I know that works great to bring people in. Yeah, it's a great incentive. So thank you.
Charlie. And remember, before I pass it to Commissioner Lovisa, remember that Commissioner Connie we need a volunteer to support the 3 organizations that she commits to volunteer for the town halls. Just think about it, who can be a lead with her to support her work in these organizations. Thank you. Commissioner Lovisa?
Sure. Connie and I were maybe kind of thinking somewhat similarly, in that I was thinking that it's possible that Don't Shoot PDX and Albina Vision Trust would maybe make sense to go together. And I didn't know about the relationship with OJRC, but that makes a lot of sense. So yeah, I would like to volunteer to help Connie on that, and maybe co-lead that with Connie.
Okay. Thank you very much, Commissioner Lovisa.
Oh, and also I wanted to mention that, yeah, of course we could also ask these groups when we reach out to them, hey, are there any groups that you know of that would be a natural fit to go along with you as part of this conversation?
Thank you. And as you can see at the chat, there is definitely money for snacks, since that's something the PAC will provide for the event. Thank you. I wanna pass it to Commissioner Charlie, but I also wanna hear from Tirsa, Simab, and Christian, because they haven't volunteered yet, and I wanna know if they have an organization that they would like to reach, or they wanna help the ones that have been mentioned. Okay, Commissioner Charlie.
I'll go ahead and pass to them, because I forgot what I was going to say.
Yes, okay. If you remember, let me know. And I will pass it to Commissioner Simab and then Commissioner Tirsa. Thank you, Commissioner Charlie.
Don't worry, Commissioner Charlie. That's happened to me a couple times. You've seen my hand go up and down a few times. Yeah, I know like almost, I know a little more than half of this list, you know, as far as having direct connections and personal connections with. So I'm happy to help out in any way. Whoever feels like they've identified organizations and whatnot, then we can list those out. And whatever's left over, I can see which one of those I'm connected with, and I'd be happy to try and connect with them.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Sima. But would you like to mention at least a couple of them? Because right now we only have 6 and there is like 26 in there.
Yeah, Street Roots, Albina Ministerial Alliance, Apano, ERCO, Catholic Charities, Lutheran Charities, Boys and Girls Club, Oregon Justice Resource Center, Immigration Counseling Services, SOAR, bit biased, but Care Oregon, Pacific Northwest Family Circle, Portland Urban League, Latino Network, First Unitarian Church Social Justice Center, Immigrant Counseling Services.
Thank you. And which one of these, all that you mentioned, do you think you would like to reach them in this next couple of weeks to the possibility of town hall?
I mean, like, I can, I don't, by mentioning them, I don't want to leave any of them out because I value them all.
Yes.
So, you know, it all depends on, based on what I've said, what's already been kind of distributed. I didn't mention Naya simply because I think that's already been covered. So, but yeah, I can reach out to any one of those or all of them if you guys need. Do a BCC email blast, make a few phone calls, whichever way in the next couple weeks.
Okay, because what I understand thank you very much, because the leads on these town halls will be the ones who will go and talk to them, either do this survey, reach out to them, follow up with them, and be there for the presentation and that. But just thank you for all these lists that you gave us. Thank you. Commissioner Tirsa?
I just want to clarify. So I think my understanding is right now we're just choosing 3 organizations, and then we will also distribute this list to the rest of the commission members who are not on the subcommittee, and also seek volunteers from there. But for today, we're just choosing 3 to start. And I don't mind partnering up with Connie for OJRC, Don't Shoot Portland, and Albina Vision Trust.
Thank you, Commissioner Tirsa. And we can choose just 3 or 5 or 7. We don't have a specific number. It's ideal to start with 3 because we wanted to start with something, but we can mention more than 3. Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. And I hear a comment in the chat. They say that Commissioner Dan say Immigrant Counselor Service is listed twice. Thank you. We will correct it. Then I will pass it. Sima, Commissioner Sima, you wanna talk? You wanna mention something? Or
No, sorry, I forgot to lower my hand.
okay, Commissioner
Sorry.
Christian, and then
Thank you.
Charlie.
I had a couple clarifying questions before offering up some connections I have. One was just really logistical. I'm assuming that most of all of the communication that we have with the organization should be through our PAC email, I'm guessing, or I don't know if it needs to be recorded because it's work for the PAC, or if we're allowed to do. Not that I was planning on it, I'm just curious if there's a hard line against like using our personal email for that communication. Actually, if someone can answer that before I say my next thing, just so I have, because that kind of influences it.
Yeah.
I will pass it to the staff to answer, and then we will get back to you, Commissioner Christian. The staff?
Yeah, so the short answer is yes. The commission has communication guidelines which give a lot more information. It's part of the internal processes document approved at the work session on May 19th, and also part of the bylaws approved on March 31st. But the short answer is use of any email that you send out to that relates to commission work is a public record. And so we have the city provides emails for volunteer members of advisory groups, and that makes it easier to process public records requests and to not expose volunteers' personal communication methodologies to public records requests. And we can definitely get more information out that's more specific to that question. But the short answer is yes to using city avenues only.
Thank you, Samir. And Commissioner Christian, what was your next question or comment?
Yes, thank you. That helps a lot. We've gone over this a few times, and I sometimes need to be reminded. Yeah, the other thing I was going to say was that I have some connections with Apano and ERCO or IRCO. I am hesitant to volunteer, not because I don't want to do it, but because I'm not sure if someone else might have a stronger connection. But if no one else like from the larger committee feels very strongly that they want to organize anything with those two, I can definitely take a crack at it. Yeah, if I don't know, someone else might be more involved with the community. So that's the only reason why. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Christian. And what I will say, because SIMA also has very good connection, I will put Apano and IRCO, and I will put Commissioner Christian and Commissioner SIMA as the leads. Thank you. Commissioner Charlie?
Okay, so since I added NARA, which wasn't on the list, can I add another group? Yeah, Painted Horse.
Painted Horse. Mm-hmm.
And yeah, well, definitely add a couple more of these start going smoothly, because there's some others I'm definitely interested in reaching out to. But let's give other people a chance. Okay.
Yes, no, that's perfect. Thank you, Commissioner Charlie. I think after we can go to the next item on the staff, on the agenda. And the next item, I'm pretty sure is the, okay.
Just a reference slide for these groups, these three groups to have. You can look back at it later. This is all going to be posted on the website, so you can find it later, but just as a reference for working around these dates when you start to plan.
Thank you. Thank you, Samir. And the last question is, what are the ideal timelines for the town halls? We need to give notice given to the public and partner organizations, members before a town hall, communicating the public input to the full PAC after a town hall, and etc. All the different outreach and report and everything. What are the ideal timelines for these town halls, the three groups we have that they were mentioned? Commissioner Shirley, you have your hand raised. You wanna talk, or do?
That was, I didn't put my hand down, but I mean, I can just say from organizing so many events in the last 2 years, let's just say, it seems like to keep it front and center and keep it on their minds. Actually, it seemed like shorter notices worked better versus really, pushing the dates way out. That's just a thought from my experience, although this is a little bit different because we'll be gathering somewhere in a building, I suppose, or online. But there was something else I wanted to say about that. I don't remember. Okay, that was just that thought popped into my mind. But let me get my hand down.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for giving us the idea that for these groups, maybe they don't need a lot of time in advance. Thank you. Commissioner Sima?
Yeah, I actually I hear what the commissioner was saying regarding shorter timeline, and for me, my experience is that short if depending on what kind of turnout we're looking for, if you and the numbers you want to drive, if you want big numbers, I'm talking about like over 50, planning having at least a month to be able to create communication and work up to the event would be great. So it all depends on how big of a draw we're looking to have, and kind of creating. Sorry, words are escaping me. Today's a weird day for all of us, isn't it? But yeah, I mean, like, what exactly are we looking to get as far as like our focus on our goals and outcome, and how important is turnout in numbers for it? To me, my bias leans towards larger numbers, simply because we want to be able to organize towards an affirming footprint on our work. And I think that takes like a month to 2 months lead time for a large event. And sometimes you can run two large events within 2 weeks, and give yourself like a month and a half to be able to plan up to it at most. I've done great with less, but my bias always asks for, at least a month to month and a half for one large event.
Thank you, Commissioner Sima. Commissioner Fate?
Sima, I think you bring up a good point about like what we're trying, like, is the purpose we need to hear from as many people as possible at these events, or I actually kind of lean towards the opposite of, like, in my mind, I'm picturing events where there's like 15 people, and so it's a little more conversational, or you have the opportunity to speak one-on-one with someone. And so I think you bring up a good point, because maybe we're all picturing something different in our heads. And I think that when we started the call, we talked about kind of like the definition between like what we're hosting versus what a partner's hosting, etc. And in my mind, the town hall is being like a meeting that's being hosted by a partner, a potential partner, in which we would be a guest or a listener. And so I don't know if that is how everyone else's thinking is, as we've talked about what town halls are. But if that's the case, then I think in terms of timeline, it'd really be like in collaboration with the partner. So if Apano is my partner, then like, hey, what meetings do you have coming up? Can we grab 45 minutes at the end of it? Or do you have like a monthly Zoom meeting that we can come to? So yeah, those are kind of my general town hall timeline thoughts.
Thank you, Commissioner Fate. We have a couple more minutes before we go to public meeting, a public comment. There's any other suggestions or ideas about the timing of these town halls? Okay. Let's go now. We now will take public comment on the issues the subcommittee is discussing. And our community members can also tell their story about policing and police accountability. We ask members of the public to keep their comments or questions to 2 minutes in length at most, and raise their hand in Zoom if you like to speak. We have one attendee, yes, and the attendee is Commissioner Dan. Please, you can talk now.
Oh, thank you. Good evening, everybody. This is Dan Handelman. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a commissioner, but I'm not on this subcommittee, so I'm just observing. One of the things that struck me being an observer today is that when you're doing town halls, when you do a virtual component, this webinar format is not very friendly. I can't see who else is in the audience. I can't see actually any commissioner or participant who has their camera turned off. I don't know who I'm talking to, and I think that's something to think about in terms of making it inviting for people. Commissioner Aiken sort of brought this issue up about, the same questions may not be suitable for every organization. And so I think it may be worthwhile thinking about specific questions to bring, depending on the community that is being talked to. I like the idea that the community engagement is going to be going on throughout the work of the commission, because I really don't know that you're going to be able to get very much done by July 30, especially because there's a thing that's called summer that's starting now, and it's going to stop raining eventually, and people are going to want to be outside and hanging out with people, and they're not going to necessarily want to go to meetings about the police oversight system, which is too bad in terms of timing, but that's just the way things are sometimes. So those are my comments. I hope that it's helpful for you all, and thank you for all your work.
Thank you, Commissioner Dan. And of course, always your comments are helpful and we appreciate it. Is there any other member of the public that you would like to comment or ask a question? And I know Commissioner Faith raised her hand, but I will just give another couple more minutes, at least one more minute, because to give this time to the public. Okay, we don't see any responses. Then I'm gonna close this for the public comments, and I will pass it again to the commissioners from the subcommittee. Commissioner Faith.
Thanks, Commissioner Handelman, for the call out. Yeah, I think Zoom webinar is helpful for us staying organized, but not helpful to make people feel really welcomed. So that's a good call. And one thing I guess I wanted to say out loud is that if we can, as we come up with questions and as they're relevant to different communities, for a lot of folks with disabilities, it's really helpful to have like visual cues as well as speaking cues. So as simple of questions that we can come up with like visual cues would be really important. So if we can develop, and for folks where English is not their native language, having visual cues is always also really helpful. So if, as we develop our kind of standard list of questions, if we can also kind of come up with like, I don't think it needs to be a slideshow, but like different pictures to resemble like what we're asking and what we're trying to get to. I know in communities of color, it's also, as I'm sure many have experienced in this commission, like it's not a linear, like, here's a question, you give me an answer. It's storytelling and it's being in relationship with one another. And so as we're thinking through questions, I just want to keep that in mind is how do we ask questions that are inviting and welcoming of story, particularly as the people that we're reaching out to, like that's their primary way of communicating.
Thank you, Commissioner Faith. And that's very important about having questions or surveys that are inclusive and accessible for all. That's very important. Thank you. Commissioner Christian?
Hi, yes. Sorry, I had a question that I'd forgotten to ask earlier. For the like outreach to partners to create town halls or organize town halls and whatnot, the conversation we've been having this meeting about like best practices or consistent ways that we can talk in different meetings, that doesn't feel complete. So I'm curious if we should wait to reach out to those communities until we have a better idea of how we're going to organize those things, or if it's kind of like a initial reach out and being like, we're going to be doing this soon, but not quite yet. I'm just curious, like how that feels, or if it's kind of like a further down the line to actually start reaching out to communities and organizations, if that makes sense.
Yes, thank you, Christian. And I would definitely have some things on the garden plot, but because it's 8:53, I will pass it to Commissioner Charlie, and then we're gonna recap. But thank you for the question. Commissioner Charlie?
In response to Commissioner Christian's question, maybe it is a good idea to at least get a connection at these for right now. And so we'll have somebody to work with, and they'll be expecting us with further information. Yeah, but I was actually raising my hand for, will we have interpreters available for these?
You asking if the PAC will provide interpreters for these town halls, and it's
Right.
something I will pass it to the staff. Oh, this stuff.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Okay, we'll now need to recap the garden plot. This is a place where we can put items that come up today, but aren't really part of today's agenda, and they can be used to develop future meeting agendas. These ideas can grow in the garden plot and develop before being discussed at a future meeting. We are only going to mention things right now that have already been brought up during the meeting. And I don't know, I don't have, okay, let me see. Do you have this stuff? Do you have things in the garden plot?
Yes, just the one thing that Commissioner Faith brought up about the purpose of town halls with relation to a desired number of attendees, whether it is better to have more attendees for the sake of reaching more people, or fewer attendees to be able to enable deeper conversations or more one-on-one conversations. That is the only item that I have for the garden plot.
Thank you. Now we go to the, we go to slide 30, this last slide, and then we have a couple of announcements.
So just the one announcement, and Commissioner Faith actually brought this up earlier as well. The city is hiring an engagement and communications coordinator for the Police Accountability Commission. And this position was posted today and is open for the next 2 weeks. There is a link in the chat to the news release. It is also on the homepage of the Police Accountability Commission, which we'll share in the next slide. This position will be taking applications for at least the next 2 weeks, and then hope to have them start around the same time that, at latest the end of July, hopefully earlier than that. As many of you may know, it does take time to go through the process, but hopefully sooner than that. And you can read more at the link, and there'll be a link on the next slide as well.
Thank you very much. Okay. Are we gonna have, okay, thank you. Oh, it's so small. I cannot see it, but let me check. We just want to say thank you to everyone, especially to the commissioners that are part of this subcommittee. Thank you for all your questions. Thank you for all your comments. Thank you for volunteering to be a lead in this effort of community engagement, and for doing this with being cultural responsive, cultural sensitive, and cultural humility. That's very good. And I cannot read this line. I'm sorry, it's so small.
It says, thank you to the interpreters supporting access to meetings of the Police Accountability Commission, as well as subcommittees for all Portlanders. Thank you to the members of the public for being here and contributing your questions and thoughts. You can give written public comment in advance of future meetings at tinyurl.com/PortlandPAC comment. You can also receive email updates on the Police Accountability Commission at tinyurl.com/PortlandPAC updates.
Thank you. And 8:58 and June 13, we adjourned this subcommittee meeting for community engagement.